Okay, welcome everyone to this Combined Knowledge Feedback webinar. This is all about taking your first steps with Power BI. So don't worry if you're a complete novice. Don't worry if you don't know what Power BI is. And if you're a know-it-all about Power BI, you're more than welcome to join in on this webinar as well, because hopefully there'll be something that we can show you that will give you some insights and hopefully help you along your journey building dashboards and reports in the Power BI solution. So without any hesitation, we can kick off and get started. So today, there's two of us on this webinar ongoing through this presentation. My name's Chris. I'll do a more formal introduction to myself and my colleague in a short moment, but with me today is Simon as well.
Hello, yes.
And we're going to basically cover the following agenda as we go through the training today. So we'll start off with a bit of an introduction to ourselves, followed by discussing what is business intelligence and how can it help your organization. We'll talk about the tools that are available in Office 365 for building reports and dashboards. And also you might be quite interested in what kind of license you might need to use the Power BI solution. Then we'll get into some practical demonstrations. I really want to prove to you today that you shouldn't be fearful of a BI solution. They're really easy to get started with, and that's what today's about. It's all about sort of showing you the starting points so that you can actually go out and try a lot of this stuff. And then we'll design some and share some dashboards in Power BI as well. Stick around to the end of the session. As we normally do with this feedback series, do give away a £50 Amazon voucher. So we'll be giving you the intel on how you can do that at the end of the session today. Obviously, that's like keeping you captive, but there's some good content to keep you going until the end of the session, so it's well worth sticking around for. So intros. So if you've listened to any of the other webinars that we've delivered as part of our feedback series, you'll know myself. My name's Chris. I'm the Technical Content and Training Lead Manager at Combined Knowledge. Our company focuses on end-user adoption and training around the Office 365 product stack. I've worked as a technical editor for Microsoft's step-by-step book series as well, and you might have caught me at some of the Microsoft conference events and communities around the United Kingdom as well. My colleague Simon's with me as well. I'll let Simon do a quick intro.
Hi, Chris. Yeah, well, thank you for the introduction. But yeah, I've recently joined Combined Knowledge. I've joined as an Office 365 end trainer. Currently, I've been working on the content for the Office 365 course and reviewing those documents. My background is primarily as a web developer, but
Cool.
other areas as well, IT manager and such. But currently, as well as the Office 365 training documents, I'm going to be working on the white labeling for our Training Plus solution.
Yeah, so we're keeping Simon very busy. He started on Thursday.
Yeah,
So far Simon's been looking over our new SharePoint, what I was talking about, Office 365 end user class. So that's a 3-day class that goes through the entirety of the Office 365 stack. So Simon's reviewing that for us. And as you mentioned, he's working on the white label project for our Training Plus solution. If you haven't seen our Training Plus solution before, it's basically on-demand learning available directly through Office 365. Our training solution can appear in the app launcher and be embedded in a variety of ways into your business services. The idea behind this is that we provide you with all the training you need on demand for Office 365 in the format of video content. And the white label project that Simon referred to is all about taking our default Combined Knowledge branding and replacing it with your organization's branding. So if you wanted to create a training package that's bespoke for your organization, not only can you rebrand our stock training content that explains all of the Office 365 apps, but you can also add your own bespoke videos as well. If you wanted some content that showed buy-in from your top level people, a little intro video as to what Office 365 means for your business, we can help you produce that content and inject it directly into our Training Plus solution. Little overview of what this looks like actually. This is our stock content. So as you can see, it's this particular example is Powerups. So this is giving us an opportunity to learn a little bit more about how to build a Power App in Office 365. And this is an example of how it could be rebranded. So you'll notice that we've changed a few elements on here. So we've got the opportunity to remove all of the combined knowledge branding and identity from the videos. And then your logo and your color scheme is overlaid and rebranded across the interface to make it a lot more relevant. I thought I'd kind of quickly dive in to this second tab that I have open at the moment. So as a little example here, if I just quickly refresh the page, you'll hear a bit of audio. Now, I'll just mute myself for a second, and you'll notice that we've got the Combined Knowledge logo and the Training Plus logo at the top of the screen. So the idea behind this is that if we wanted to implement a sort of rebranding effect, we could just quickly put in the rebranding aesthetic for you and completely change the feel of the product. So our designers could work with you to make Training Plus a core part of your learning in your organization and something that feels a lot more designed by your own organization as well. So hopefully that gives you an idea what Simon's going to be working on over the next few days. So it'll be interesting for myself to see how Simon gets on. But we thought we'd just quickly show you what we're getting up to over the next couple of weeks at Combined Knowledge. So to continue our discussion around Power BI, let's go back to taking our first steps with Power BI. So effectively, if we wanted to talk about what business intelligence is and how it can help your organization, one of the most important things is business intelligence is reformatting data so it's more palatable. One of the things that it will focus on quite often is the health and performance of a business. So this can help you gather insights into the health of business processes. So business processes can quite often map and grab information as those processes going on. Was an order late? Was an order early? You know, did it ship at all? Those kind of things. And the idea is that we could set dashboards up to gather that information, create visuals, and start to create data points. This allows us to identify where extremities are happening and allow us to take corrective actions in a timely fashion. So if we wanted to achieve something like that, we would typically need to involve the following steps in designing a business intelligence report or dashboard. So we'd need to perhaps get one or more data sources and start pulling the data from those data sources into a model which we can start to use to build visualizations of. And quite often the interesting part of that is you'll have a meeting. Someone in the meeting will say, hey Simon, I want you to put together a report that shows which age groups are starting, which age groups find which products most popular. So you might be trying to say, the remote control cars, are they more popular for teenagers and more popular for adults, or adults that are a bit too old for toys, but they seem to buy these kind of things? Simon might be sort of sitting there thinking, I know my data source, and the only thing I know about my customers is their date of birth. So Simon's thinking, oh, crumbs. But that's the good thing about a business intelligence solution. Sometimes you can actually transform the data and create complex calculations. So Simon could take their date of birth, divide it by 365 based on today's relative date, round it down, because no one wants their age rounded up. That's really offensive. And we can take that data and turn it into maybe a new column of data that's called age. So take their date of birth, turn it into age. And then Simon could then say, right, this doesn't put people into age groups. My age groups are 18 to 25, 25 to 35, these kind of age groups. So he might create another calculation that looks at their age and then puts them into groups. So you're that age, you're that age group, you're that age group. So then when Simon comes to analyze all of this data, he could actually use his age groups, cross-reference that with what products are selling, and see which products are more popular to which age group. So Simon might not have all of the answers to the question from his data source, but he can certainly use a business intelligence platform to start to work out what the answers to these statements are. We sometimes call those grain statements. That's basically something that the report must yield once it's designed. And effectively, we can use these platforms to analyze large data sets. So these could be millions of rows of data, all stuffed in multiple database tables. The idea behind BI is it can churn through that data. It uses a few different languages to do this, M language and DAX, which is the data expression language. If you wanted to take Power BI or a business intelligence solution a little bit more seriously, you'd learn a little bit more about DAX and M language to achieve that. And then the end goal, the pretty thing, is to create insights into by creating reports and visualizations to provide insights that are actionable. We can take corrective actions. Sometimes that involves one brave person to take it from pillar to post, but sometimes it might be multiple people. Sometimes with business intelligence projects, someone would design the data model so it tidies up the data and gives us our elements to report on. Someone completely different might be in charge of the reports. So they do the fun stuff. They do the stuff that's pretty, whereas the person who does the hard work and builds all the calculations, they probably don't get as much credit. So if we're talking about business intelligence, you probably want to know, well, what do I have that could already achieve this? And quite often people who have Office 365 have a fantastic solution that they could use, either activate or maybe they already have it as part of an E5 license to start building these solutions. So Power BI gives you the option for creating reports and dashboards, which are interactive. So as you click on data, it could filter and change the information that's outputting on the reports. You can have tips that pop out at certain data points to make it a little bit more real. You could also access your reports from a variety of different sources as well. So if you're in the Office 365 stack, you might want to put, for example, a report that you've created in Power BI, you put it on a dashboard and you're thinking, hey, I've just built a Power App. I want to put my report in there. So you can put a Power BI tile inside your Power App. You could go to SharePoint and add a Power BI web part to a SharePoint page. So you've got a variety of ways that you can expose this data, as well as the mobile apps. I mean, you can get on your Android or Apple phone or Windows phone, grab the Power BI app. It's really funny because I've got an Apple Watch and my Power BI app for my phone is now on my watch. And I can actually look at the dashboards from my watch.
Oh, wow.
It's a bit nuts because the visualization is about an inch.
Yeah, so it's not very big, is it?
No, you might as well get it out. You get the phone out of your pocket and look at it properly. But I don't know, it's fun. Always have a laugh about that. Power BI is great. It can connect to a large range of data sources, from anything from SQL databases to Google Analytics. So you can suck in information about your website and
some all tools available to the business. Then.
Yeah, exactly. There's such a large variety, but actually you might be a bit spoiled for choice at the end of the day. And then effectively we've got advanced tools in Power BI for modeling. Now, I'm not going to lie, there is a lot of overlap between data modeling using Power Pivot in Excel and Power BI. But one of the major differences between Excel and Power BI when it comes to data modeling is the publishing factor. You can publish your reports to a wide range of different areas in Office 365 and mobile apps as well. So there are a lot of benefits for using Power BI, although a lot of the components are very similar to that you would find in Excel using Power Pivot. And then, as we mentioned, you normally consume published reports via the web browser, but there's also a desktop application, and that's what I kind of want to focus on my next slide. So effectively, there are two tools for building solutions in Power BI. You can actually just get away with using the Power BI web service. I'm on an E5 tenant, so I'll just quickly sign into that. So I'll go to office.com, sign in, and just for this demonstration today, I've created a little trial tenant. When I sign in this Office 365 tenant, this is an E5, so Enterprise 5 license, and you'll notice I've got Power BI, so that's included in an Enterprise 5. If you're using Enterprise 3, if you're using different licenses that don't provide you with Power BI, we'll talk about licenses very shortly, so you can still get this solution if required. So you'll notice that if I click on Power BI on my homepage or from the app launcher, this is apps.powerbi.com. It's a web service. I can actually connect to data sources and build reports and dashboards directly from this experience. Now, I'll show you how to achieve that a little bit more later, but for now, this is the web version of the product. In addition to that, there's also the desktop application as well. So this is the desktop application. You can get it from the Windows Store, or you can download it directly from the Microsoft website. If you're not allowed to install applications on your work computer, you might need to speak to your IT team to set this up for you. One of the quirky things about this application is it doesn't update. You have to download and reinstall the application with the update.
Oh,
Which is a bit of a menace for anyone who doesn't work in IT. You'd have to get IT to reinstall the latest updates. And you get this badge at the bottom that says updates available. You're thinking, oh no, not another one. And it's always recommended to keep the products up to date. So if you do have the application, you might need to work with your IT teams if you don't have administrative control over your laptop or computer. The other thing just to bear in mind with the desktop application, I'm currently signed in. So just at the top right of the screen, I'm actually signed in with an Office 365 account. Now, actually, I don't need to sign in. You could actually open this app, not sign in, and actually connect to a data source as long as you have the credentials, or maybe connect to a file, and actually build a BI solution. But when you get to the point where you want to publish, you wouldn't be able to publish without signing in. But that means that if you're an individual that's curious and wants to try this solution out, then you could actually download the solution, connect to a data source, and actually have a bit of a play. And it's important to understand that Power BI doesn't change the data source. You create steps for manipulating the data in your data model. So you're not harming your data. So there's no harm in actually connecting to a data source and having a play to see what you can do. So we'll talk a little bit more about how you can learn more about this solution later. But for now, let's close the Power BI desktop application. So what can you do in both? Well, effectively, if you're using the Power BI web service, you can connect to a data source and build reports and dashboards. If your data is really clean and doesn't need any amendments, that's the fastest way to build a solution, and we'll look at that momentarily. Alternatively, if your data is a mess, maybe it was data that's collected from a retail environment, you've got databases that are in a very linear model, and it doesn't really work for building reports, you might need to load your data into Power BI, query the data to choose what kind of data you want to pull in and how it should be formatted, and then use your data model to optimize your data and also introduce more calculations and measures to make sure that you've got the correct endpoints for building your visualizations. You can then design a report in the desktop application, but that's as far as you go. Once you've built your report, you'd have to publish it to Power BI Web, which was why that publish button was grayed out when we were looking at it earlier. You need to be signed in to send that project, right up to the cloud. So that's kind of like a little overview there of how Power BI kind of works. So you've got this desktop application for more advanced work, and for more simplified work, you can just use the web version. So you want to have a go at this. I did mention that the desktop application you don't necessarily have to sign in and use. You could use that non-signed in, but then you wouldn't be able to publish. But if you wanted to use the full suite of services, there's a couple of scenarios. So I mentioned that I'm using an E5 license in my Office 365 tenant. That gives me Power BI Pro. It's also worth noting that Power BI Pro allows you to consume and create Power BI dashboards and reports. However, you'd also need a license to consume as well. So if you created a Power BI report and published it and shared it with someone, they would need a license. Even if they're not planning on building anything, they'd still need a license to be able to look at the report. Now, let's say that, you understand that and you're not using E5. You've got 10 users in your organization, 2 of which are building reports, 8 of which are consuming. So you've got maybe an E3 license. Don't worry, you could potentially upgrade those 10 users for £7.50 per user per month. They can then build Power BI solutions. So they can create a self-service modern Power BI dashboard and report, share it with other people who have the license. But like I say, it's important to remember that a Power BI Pro license is required to consume a published dashboard or report. Now, if you're thinking, wow, £7.50 per user per month, we've got large-scale reports to create that need to be consumed by hundreds and maybe even thousands of users in an organization, that's when you might want to think about Power BI Premium. Power BI Premium works better for organizations with large amounts of audiences for your reports and dashboards. So effectively, that means that if you wanted to do really big data analytics and you needed to have more brute force behind your Power BI dashboard generation and report generation, you could actually have dedicated capacity, which means that Microsoft dedicate resources such as CPUs and RAM to basically push more power into the Power BI platform behind the scenes. So administrators can optimize your experience in Power BI by using this premium service. Otherwise, you're just using the shared capacity, which is the default. As you can see, it starts at around £3,766.60 per month, but that's actually dependent on users' capacity. As the users and the requirements for capacity change, that obviously dictates the price. If you do search on Bing or Google for Power BI Premium, you can actually request a consultant to contact you to talk about your Power BI needs. So they'll be able to best instruct you on the licensing using Power BI Premium, but it's fairly set in stone for E5 or non-E5 users when it comes to Power BI Pro. So we've got an Enterprise 5 license, so we're able to actually get up and go. So how do we get started? Well, firstly, one thing I will say is that do bear with me if some of the screenshots look a little different. Microsoft, about a month or so ago, changed Power BI from a kind of black and yellow theme to a kind of white and yellow theme. You can see that in the desktop application we had open earlier, but you can see that this is white here. But actually, when you open up some of the menus, they're still black. So it's ongoing as a rebrand. So just bear in mind that that little slide that you saw earlier is slightly different. But, you know, I think it looks quite crisp now, I think. So let's talk about data. So one of the things that we do at Combined Knowledge, we run a 2-day getting started with Power BI course. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But on that training course, we have a variety of data sources that we like to use to get started, from SQL databases to things like these Excel files. So this was put together by a courseware author of ours. We use these resources during our training sessions. And this is a fantastic file that a contact of ours, Ted Patterson, has put together. It just has loads and loads of interesting data inside of it. So we can see things like product categories, subcategories, sales revenue that's been generated, fiscal year that the revenue is generated in. It is American data, which is fine by me. We'll use some of this in our data. Now, this data is quite clean. You see we've got good headings. We don't really need to calculate any more data. So I could actually negate using the desktop application completely because I've got everything that I need. So if your data is clean, we could actually just get started in Power BI Web. So I close that file, and what we're going to do is we're going to follow these steps. So we'll put this up on YouTube later, so if you want to pause the video and have a look at these steps in detail, you're more than welcome to. But the first thing I did is I accessed Power BI. You can access it from the app launcher if it's part of your license. The first time you access it, it will also then get pinned onto your Office 365 homepage, which is how I accessed it. You can also go to apps.powerbi.com as well. The next thing that we're going to do is introduce your playground. And what I mean by that is there are two areas that we could work in. Workspaces are for collaboration. They are effectively an Office 365 group that allows us to invite members and owners to collaborate around projects that include Power BI assets. Then there's My Workspace. This is a little bit like OneDrive in the fact that it's personal to you. So when you start building stuff in here, only you can see it. So it's a great little playground to start off with, and that's where I'm going to build my solution. Click on the drop down, you'll notice that I've sort of been quite busy building a few little solutions of my own. And what I might do is just get rid of some of these just to avoid confusion. I might keep some of these other ones though. I like my holiday stuff. So I've been doing some holiday reports with data that we've got in our database. But it's time that I sort of built something new. So I click on My Workspace just at the top of the screen, and this is a kind of summary of the different resources that I have. So you've got your data sets, which are connected files and databases that you can use to generate your reports. You've got connected workbooks, which are a way of using Excel Online to display workbooks like Excel spreadsheets directly in this navigation. We've got our reports, which are designed to produce visualizations of our data. And then we've also got dashboards, which are a way of pinning multiple visuals from many different reports all in one place to create a bespoke story for our users. So we'll talk about reports and dashboards, starting off with reports, but we need some data, and that's where my Excel file from earlier takes shape. So I'm going to click on the Create button at the top right of the screen. And you'll notice that what we've seen earlier are just options. So we've got things like data sets, which we're going to build right now. So I'm going to connect to my Excel spreadsheet. If your data set refreshes, i.e. maybe it's live data, and maybe transactions are happening throughout the day, you can actually schedule your data sets to update. So you can do that, I think it's 48 times, I think it was 48 times a day as a maximum. So you could do it every half hour during the day. You could refresh your data set, so you can schedule that. If you want to do something that's more rapid for like a call center where you've got calls pending, you want to see how many calls are in the queue, you might want a streaming data set. So that's basically for live information that literally has to be by the second. Now we don't need something so fast, so we're just going to stick with a standard data set in this regard. And it's going to say, where's your data? So I could connect to a SQL database, or I could potentially grab a file from my computer. Now, I know quite a few of you, you'll probably have, you've got an Excel spreadsheet that's your pride and joy, and you're thinking, could I connect Power BI to that spreadsheet and have a bit of a play? And remember, this won't harm your spreadsheet, so if you want to have a play, you certainly can. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a file, and I'm going to cheat. This file's not in SharePoint or libraries. It's not in my OneDrive for Business. It's not even in my personal OneDrive. I'm really lazy. It's on my desktop. That's where all the best files are, right? So I'll go to Local File, and let's go to my desktop. There's my lovely sales data, and I'm going to click on Open. So it says, Chris, what do you want to do? This is an Excel spreadsheet, so you could host it. Let's see if I can kind of show you here. You could put the workbook, make sure I'm doing the right one. Yeah, you could put the workbook here as a link and display it in Excel Online. I don't want to do that. I want to use the worksheet as a data source. So actually what I do want to do is import it as a Power BI data source. I want to import this rather than just display it in Excel Online, the web version of Excel. So I choose Import. Now, by importing that file, it's not in a data source where it can be updated. It's just basically being consumed as raw data. But actually, that doesn't bother me because all of this data is legacy data. It's never going to be updated because it's previous year-on-year data. So actually, it's okay that that's happened. So that static data is now a data set. So there's that sales data there. And what I want to do is, you'll notice that now that my data is present in Power BI, I can actually create a report directly off the back of it. So I'm going to click on Create Report. So I've zoomed my web browser in just a little bit to kind of help with the discussion, but as you can see, it's getting a bit cramped on the screen. Rather than zooming this out, I'm just going to actually close down a couple of these menus. So firstly, remember my Excel spreadsheet from earlier. One of the things that I want to sort of highlight here is that all of the columns in my table are now present. And what I could do is I could start to actually sort of select information and kind of think, what would I like to see? I might want to see maybe my product category by sales revenue, as an example. So you can do one of two things. You could add a visualization and configure it, or if you, as an off chance, think, oh, I'm going to start over here and select a column to use as part of the axes for my table. If you click on category, it goes, right, you need a visualization to pull this off. I add a default table in there to get you started. And then I'm thinking, I want to see category by sales revenue. So click on that, and you'll notice that the information is just sort of updated over here. So it's still a table, not very interesting, but it's showing the data that I've selected. So what I do is, because this visualization is a bit bland, I'm going to go over to the visualizations area and pick what I think might show the data off the best. So I've got a variety of different things. Some of my favorite ones are things like gauges. I've actually got a degree in geology and I did a lot of cartography, so I quite like maps. So maps are quite useful if you've got a lot of geographical data. And the cool thing is, you can actually go to a marketplace and get more apps. So you can put these visualizations into play. One of my favorite visualizations is a fish tank.
Oh.
And the fish swim around. Now, if the fish, let's say if a value is really big, the fish is big. If the value goes into a negative figure, the fish dies and floats to the top of the tank. It's really fun. And as you flick through months, you see all the fish die, and you think, wow, that's a bad month. And when I show people this, they're like, oh, we need that. We need that as a dashboard on our wall, refreshing, showing people fish swimming around. Moment a fish dies. Oh my God, that's happened. Let's look into that. Nothing so elaborate at the moment, but don't be surprised. There are some great visualizations created by the community, but even the stock ones are great. And I'm going to prove that to you. So I'm going to click on the line chart here, and it looks like our data is sort of nosediving. So yeah, I don't think that's sort of quite working for me. So maybe I'll switch some of the data around. Now over here, these are known as wells, and you can drag and drop data into wells. So I might decide actually let's change this. Let's get the fiscal year and drag and drop that up there. Maybe we'll put our category down here, and maybe we'll get rid of sales revenue. And you can see that, oops, let's pop our category back down here. As you can see, the data sort of changes. And this is kind of one of my favorite things about this, this kind of information, because you can sort of just sort of plug in and play and then just sort of add in values until you sort of see the kind of information taking shape in a way, structure or form you want. And some people say, no, that's not quite right. Maybe I want that in this order. You just play, just move the values between different wells, untick, retick, play until you're happy. Now, one thing I've noticed here is that this data is going in the wrong direction. Although our sales are going up, the value at the bottom is going in the wrong direction. So there are some quick fixes to that. Some of the general fixes appear in this ellipsis at the top right of the screen, where we can choose things like sort ascending and descending. This quick fix, we can just flip the data around. And that looks okay. Something a little bit more advanced though, we might want to say, all right, well, we're making that kind of money with all of our products. But what if we wanted to split those products based on different categories? So we were talking to Simon earlier about those different kind of product categories like remote control cars or soft toys. So I might actually drag the category into one of these other fields like the legend. And you'll notice that immediately the data's up to date. And if I place my mouse cursor over, it's providing me with a tooltip based on the data points showing me those sales growth. So that's quite interesting. And each one of these can be customized. If you don't like the color scheme, if you don't like the position of the legend, then you've got this icon here for formatting, and you've got your trend lines option over here as well. So if you wanted to have a little bit of a play around, and you know this is quite small to see on the screen, you can sort of go into these sort of settings and have a bit of a play. So we might decide that actually with the legend, we might want it maybe to the right, like that, and we could sort of go a little bit further down, maybe make the font size a little bit bigger on the legend. And we can also play around with our data colors and so forth, background colors, and have a bit of a change around. Now, although this hasn't consumed a huge amount of my time, let's pretend that you know, we've got a fairly good visualization on the screen. It's making sense to me, but I've got many more visualizations to create, and they're kind of grouped into different categories. So just like Microsoft Excel, at the bottom of the screen, you'll notice there's a tab-based system. So you could navigate through your tabs and name them just like in Microsoft Excel. I'll call this year-on-year sales, and then I could choose to create additional pages with different visualizations. If you prefer, you can actually create buttons to navigate between the different pages as well, if they find that helpful. Now, that's pretty cool. What I might do is I might sort of be a bit lazy now. And what I mean by that is that I've just created this visualization and I've run out of ideas. I'm not very original, and I'm thinking, you know what other visualizations could I create for my data? Well, I'm going to let Power BI do that for me. So I click on my data source on the right, and it's got the opportunity to create quick insights. So what that does is it looks at my data and works out, what charts and graphs can I create based on the data that you have. And it might give me loads of new ideas that I could potentially utilize. So I'll give that a few moments to run, and I'll leave that in the background for a moment, and then I'll also save my report. So I'm going to call this product sales, something like that. So once I've saved my report, you'll notice that in my workspace, I've got my report section and I've got product sales. So I know this report only has one visualization inside it, but it gives me the opportunity to share that with my colleagues. So I've got a couple of reports up here. I've got a holiday report that I've sort of put together that has time off by person, and it's got geographical data plotted across the map, which is quite cool. That's one I've been playing around with. This one over here, got my product sales, and then I can choose to perhaps share that with another colleague. So I might want my colleague Simon to have access to that. Check this out. Now Simon could potentially share my report with other people. Now I know that Simon and myself, maybe because we're all E5 licenses, he could share that with anyone else in my business. So I'm actually going to sort of click share, and then Simon's got access to that. Now Simon comes back to me and says, Chris, great report. I'd like to see further insights into your data. Additionally, we've got several other reports and they all have really useful information, but I'm a bit sick of jumping between several reports and all of the different tabs and pages that those reports have. Wouldn't there be a really cool way of bringing all of that juicy information to one place? So think about this. Maybe a regional manager is not interested in sales that are happening in specific regions. They're more interested in sales that are happening, in their region. So one of the interesting things that we can do is, although we've created reports that allow us to share fantastic visualizations, what we could potentially do is design a dashboard. Now, dashboards aren't anything too special. They're a single page, and what you can do is grab visualizations from many different reports and aggregate them onto a single page. So this allows you to tell a story across multiple reports that might help make people get better, make more sense of multiple reports by aggregating the data into one point. The other cool thing is that you can even optimize dashboards to appear in a specific way on a mobile phone. So if you get the Power BI app on your phone, you could organize the report in a specific way. So what you do is you must have a few reports to work with, and then you can just pin them onto a specific dashboard. So Simon's our regional manager for the south of the United Kingdom. So what I might want to do for Simon is maybe create a new dashboard that takes visualizations from multiple reports and puts them onto a page that's going to be useful for him. So to create a dashboard, you click on the option Pin Visual, and then it says, would you like to pin to an existing dashboard or a new dashboard? I'm going to choose a new dashboard. I'm going to call this Regional Manager South. Now, it's created my dashboard, but I think Simon did say to me earlier, Chris, could you create more insights into the data and show them to me? Well, I'm not going to add them to my major reports because they're not really going to serve my general audience. But for Simon, maybe I could go back to my insights. So I could go to View Insights. And what this does is it looks at the data and starts to sort of show me different charts and graphs based on the various columns. So we've got sales revenue by category. That's kind of similar to what I've already got. But I have seen some interesting things a little bit further down where it starts to sort of break down specific toys. So this is showing us that the Twitter follower action figure and Godzilla action figure were noticeably higher in sales revenue. I think Simon might be interested in Godzilla. Yeah?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we'll go for that. So I'm going to choose Pin. I'm going to pin to an existing dashboard and choose Regional Manager South. So Simon now knows which products are selling a little bit more. And we might just sort of pin something else as well, just for additional content. There we go. Now you'll notice that it's saying create a phone view for this dashboard or go to the dashboard. I'm going to go to the dashboard and have a look at what it looks like. So with dashboards, they're only a single screen, so you don't have multiple pages, and you can just click and drag to move them around. Let me just navigate back to that dashboard. It's worth noting that if you click on a visualization in a dashboard, it will actually take you to that visualization in the report. So it almost acts as like a drill down, really. So there's Simon's dashboard, but it's a bit widescreen at the moment. It's going to look quite big on a mobile phone. So what I might decide to do is go to the mobile view, because Simon normally has the Powerups app on his mobile phone. And this allows me to maybe sort of move stuff around. Maybe Simon wants to see the fiscal year at the top. Maybe this needs to be a bit bigger. There we are. And maybe that's okay as it is. So that's my phone view. I can switch back to my web view again. So again, Simon said, is it done yet? I'll say yep. So we click share. Give it back to Simon, see what he thinks. So a couple of important things. Once the data set is set up, what we might want to do is look at scheduling a refresh. Now, if that data source is housed in like a SQL database or maybe on a SharePoint site, once we've published our report, we might need to set up the report. So go into the settings for our report, and we can actually set it up with the correct account that allows the data to refresh. And then we can set up a refresh schedule to refresh the data. So maybe all of our sales data is processed in the evening, so I could set it to refresh at 6 o'clock in the morning. So every time Simon opens up his Power BI solution, he's got the opportunity to look at that content straight away. So that is a great way to play around with the product. But like I said, you kind of need an E5 license or a Power BI Pro license to get into the web version of the product. So if you don't have that, there are a few things that you can do. Firstly, this is a trial E5 tenant. So if you go onto Microsoft's Office 365 homepage for a Office 365 Enterprise 5 license, you can actually request a trial for a couple of months. If you wanted to practice, you could use that trial environment to basically have a bit of a play around with the web version on an E5 license. Alternatively, if you're a little bit more of an advanced user and you want to use the Power BI desktop application, as mentioned, you can use that without a license if you want to, but you won't be able to publish up to the web version once you're ready. But it at least gives you the opportunity to pull in the data, maybe do a bit of data modeling, which is a little bit more advanced, and produce the same kind of reports. So think about, again, what you kind of want to achieve, but there's a couple of ways that you could set out after this webinar to have a little bit of a play around with Power BI. Now, I appreciate that, you might want a little bit more structure. So one of the things that we offer at Combined Knowledge, similar to the content that we used for our demonstration, that content came from our Power BI 2-day course. We provide you with a rich selection of data sources that you can use to learn key skills about building Power BI solutions. So in that course, delivered by one of our many experts, you'll get the opportunity to have a general introduction to Power BI, which includes, similar to what I've just demonstrated there, a more comprehensive hands-on approach to using that web interface. So all of the key things that I've spoken to you about in this webinar, you could probably take away and have a play with. But if you wanted to have more time spent on this particular subject with hands-on exercises, the introduction to Power BI is a really good module for that. We also cover the Power BI desktop to explain its purpose and its functionality, and then we will go through the various builds for a Power BI project. So we start off with the pure basics of the concept. What kind of drain statements do we have? What are we trying to achieve? And from that meeting, we come out of the meeting in a theoretical environment and say, right, let's crack open Power BI desktop application. We're going to start off with a query, which allows us to connect to a particular data source. And the queries allow us to choose which tables we're pulling in, which columns we're bringing in to allow us to refine the data. So we're not pulling in all the data, especially if we don't need half of it. We just pull in what we need to actually achieve our goals. We can also tidy up the data as it's being pulled in so that we do a little bit of data manipulation every time the data is refreshed. After which we can then do something like a data model. So that's where I was chatting with Simon about those age groups. So how do we work out their age? How do we work out which band they go into? That's your data modeling. So that's creating additional calculated columns and measures to get values that you can use in your visualizations, which allow you to build your reports. That's where it ends in Power BI Desktop. Once you've built a report, you have to publish it to the Power BI web service. The web version of Power BI is the only location where you can build the dashboard. So that's your mechanism for further sort of aggregating and sharing content, but you could just share your report. But you can only share your report if it's published to Power BI web. And then we've got Excel. We do talk a little bit about Excel and its overlap with Power BI on the course. And we also talk about how you can use Excel data models and anything that you've already built in Excel to fuel Power BI. The last thing we talk about on that course is things like licensing and app workspaces. So app workspaces are those collaborative workspaces where multiple users can work on Power BI solutions. And that's our 2-day course. It's very hands-on, really, really engaging. It's one of my favorite courses to teach, which is why I was so keen to do this webinar today. So if you'd like a private delivery for that, I quite often actually attend sites for different businesses around the UK, actually teaching that privately on site. It's a 2-day course, so we could use a meeting room in your organisation. We could take a few of you up to a total class of 16 through that particular content. If you're feeling that you wouldn't mind actually attending this course, but you don't want a private version of the course, our next public date for the Power BI 2-day course is on the 5th or 6th of December. So there's plenty of time to book onto that. So if you go to the combinedknowledge.com website and look for courses, there's a button for Power BI. It shows you our upcoming Power BI courses. But I thought I'd also sort of just show the link to that on the screen. But I'll pop that into the chat window in a couple of minutes. Okay, so the last thing that I'll cover, and then we'll do a bit of Q&A, is just to let you know that we've had a lot of requests for a Power BI session. That's fine by me. Absolutely love Power BI, so I'm more than happy to sort of take people through that content. So first of all, check the chat window. I've just put the link to the Power BI course into the chat window if you're interested in the public class in December. Yeah, if you're interested in our next webinar, we'll basically be pushing that out via our newsletter. If you're interested, we'll be running a session on kind of building interfaces in Powerups. So in the same way that we got started with Power BI today, if you want to get started with Powerups, we'll show you how to build some solutions directly in Powerups. You'll be surprised how quickly you can build something that you can access on your mobile phone in the space of about 5 minutes, but we'll go into a bit of detail with that. If you're interested in getting in touch with us at Combined Knowledge, it's sales@combined-knowledge.com to speak to our sales team. Our contact number is also on the page as well if you're interested. Thanks for sticking around as well. So one thing that I've just sort of put into the window there is for those who are sort of still in the session, thank you. There's a special hashtag that you can put into the chat window. So if you just leave me a chat message which has hashtag MSPBI, and your contact email address, just pop that into the chat window. You can send that to me privately. I'll basically be picking one of you as a winner, and we'll contact you directly after the webinar. I'll ask my admin team to just basically pass you your Amazon voucher. So yeah, if you just privately message me, just hashtag MSPBI and your email address, I will then pass you a lovely Amazon voucher for £50. I wish I could do that myself, but I'm not allowed to, neither is Simon, so we just have to be jealous. Okay, so obviously the information that you provide for us, that email address, is only used to send you your Amazon voucher, okay? So that's all we're going to use it for, just to let you know. So lastly, I'm going to basically just say thank you for attending the webinar today. For the video recording, I'm just going to sort of say that we'll bring the video to a close now. And for those who are on the live session, we're going to be doing a little bit of Q&A. So thank you very much for your time. I hope you enjoyed the webinar.